Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Fellow inmates caused Todd Chrisley to break down in tears. Since a presidential pardon saw him get an early release from prison, Todd Chrisley has been sharing his story about his time behind bars. In one recent share, the Chrisley Knows Best star revealed an emotional moment concerning him and other inmates. Todd Chrisley recently shared an emotional moment during his daughter's podcast. Todd Chrisley and his family previously became known to audiences through the USA Network series, Chrisley Knows Best. In 2022, however, Todd and his wife Julie were convicted of a variety of charges, including tax evasion and bank fraud. The two were initially sentenced to spend a combined 19 years behind bars. However, the two saw an early release this past May thanks to a presidential pardon from President Donald Trump. Since their release, Todd and Julie have been sharing their story with various outlets. The couple recently appeared on their daughter Savannah's Unlocked podcast. During a recent episode, Todd talked about what it was like during his time leaving prison. With Savannah noting he gave away a lot of his stuff, Todd reportedly left with only a small notebook on him. When staff asked Todd about the notebook, he reportedly shared that it contained all the notes I'm going to use to tell on y'all when I get out. And it's under my legal name. Todd then shared the send-off when he left. He shared all the men had lined up. Savannah commented that she had seen this when she drove up. The Chrisley Knows Best star revealed powerful words that were shared with him as he left. Todd shared, "They all lined up in the lobby, and they started chanting when I walked out. And I started crying. And they said, 'Don't leave us behind.'" It was at this point that Todd emphasized a promise he made. "And I'm not going to leave those guys behind because I know how they have been abused from the case managers, from the counselors, not doing what they're supposed to be doing." As previously reported, this was a promise that Todd has made previously in the time since his release. He even shared stories about the men he met and his desire to help them at a press release just a few days following his original release. On social media, fans have also been sharing their own reactions to Todd's words. Many had hoped that, with his name, he could make a difference. A few even emphasized that Todd was making something positive out of his time in prison. Some comments included, "It was just another humid Georgia afternoon at FPC Pensacola, where reality star Todd Chrisley was quietly serving his prison sentence. The sun burned hot overhead, casting long shadows across the prison yard, and Todd had kept mostly to himself. While he had adjusted outwardly to the routine, waking at dawn, cleaning floors, folding laundry, internally he was struggling. But no one, not even he, expected what would happen next. In the months since he'd been incarcerated, Todd had done his best to maintain a certain level of dignity. The man who once lived in a lavish Nashville mansion and flaunted a life of luxury on Chrisley Knows Best now shared a 6-by-9-foot cell with another inmate, ate bland cafeteria food, and lived under constant surveillance. Still, he kept a firm grip on his image, impeccably ironed uniforms, polite manners, and even a sarcastic quip here and there to remind people he hadn't lost his edge. But on this day, everything changed. It started in the recreation room. Todd was quietly reading a book when a group of fellow inmates approached. At first, their tone was lighthearted, even playful. But something about it didn't sit right. "Hey Hollywood," one of them called, a tall man named Reggie with a deep southern drawl. "You ever miss your golden toilet or just your Botox appointments?" The others chuckled. Todd looked up with a tight smile. "I miss decent conversation. Guess I'll just have to settle." The jab landed, but Reggie wasn't fazed. "You think you're better than the rest of us," he said, stepping closer. "You ain't got cameras protecting you now." You ain't got no assistant fetching your Starbucks. You're one of us now, just another number in a jumpsuit. Todd swallowed. I never said I was better. I'm just trying to do my time and stay out of trouble. But the group wasn't interested. Several days, Todd found himself increasingly targeted. Inmates would knock over his food tray. Someone switched his laundry with another inmate's soiled clothes. The worst was when he discovered photos of his family, Savannah, Grayson, even little Chloe, ripped in half and stuffed under his bunk. Todd tried to report it discreetly, but when the prison staff offered little support, he was left to fend for himself. The emotional weight began to build. He didn't want to show weakness, but he also wasn't made for this world. It was a Sunday evening when the final blow came. Todd had just finished a brief call with Savannah. She tried to sound upbeat, talking about Chloe's school project and how she was trying to get visitation paperwork cleared, but he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. The stress of managing her own life, helping with her younger siblings, and supporting both parents behind bars was catching up to her. She's just a kid, Daddy, Savannah had said, her voice breaking. She still cries for you at night. I try to be strong, but it's a lot. Todd's heart ached. He hung up, walked silently back to his bunk, and sat on the edge of it, his hands shaking. That's when Reggie and his group passed by his bunk again. One of them muttered under their breath, loud enough for Todd to hear. Guess money can't buy backbone either. Todd looked up, the tears already welling in his eyes. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice cracking. I haven't done anything to you. You don't belong here, Reggie snapped. You walk around like you're too good for this place. Always talking to guards like you're some celebrity. Ain't nobody got sympathy for a tax fraud who used his own family to play America. That last sentence struck deep. Too deep. Todd stood up, opened his mouth to respond, then faltered. His knees felt weak. The pressure, the loneliness, the guilt, it all exploded at once. He sat back down, buried his face in his hands, and wept. Real, uncontrollable sobs. The room went quiet. Even the other inmates who had taunted him watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen Todd Chrisley, ever smirking, ever confident, ever sarcastic Todd, break down like that. The guards noticed, too. One stepped over and quietly asked if he wanted to see the chaplain or be moved to isolation for a bit. Todd shook his head, barely able to respond. He cried for Savannah, who was too young to carry the burdens he'd left behind. He cried for Chloe, who didn't understand why her grandfather vanished. He cried for Julie, who was suffering in a separate prison hundreds of miles away. And finally, he cried for himself, for the reputation he'd built, the legacy he'd lost, and the very real consequences he now lived every minute of every day. Later that evening, he received a surprise visit from the prison's chaplain. The man, soft-spoken and gentle, sat across from Todd and simply listened. Todd didn't say much at first, just sat silently, wiping away the remnants of his tears. I thought I could handle this, Todd finally whispered. But every day, I feel like a piece of me is dying. I don't know how much longer I can pretend I'm okay. The chaplain nodded. You don't have to pretend here, Todd. You're human. You made mistakes. But that doesn't mean you can't heal. Let this be the bottom so you can climb up. Todd looked at him with glassy eyes. What if I don't know how? The chaplain smiled gently. Then we'll start small. One honest moment at a time. And for the first time in months, Todd felt something he hadn't felt in a while. Hope. The next day, he avoided Reggie and the group, keeping to himself, but not hiding. When one inmate whispered something nasty about his family, Todd didn't respond. He just kept walking, quietly reciting Psalm 34 in his head. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. It wasn't a perfect day, but it was a start.